She lay in the dirt, her body curled against the biting cold, the taste of dust and copper on her tongue. The wind cut like knives across the desolate plain, carrying with it the rustle of dry weeds and the lonely creak of a broken fence. Her hands were raw, her lips cracked, and her breathing shallow. Around her neck hung a piece of cardboard, its edges curled and smeared with mud. In shaky black letters, it read, "Useless mouth." She didn't know how long she had been there. Time blurred into pain. Her ribs ached, her legs felt too heavy to move, and her eyelids were losing their fight against the dark. Somewhere in her half-conscious state, she wondered if this was how it ended, unnoticed, unwanted, and utterly alone. The sound of boots crunching on gravel reached her ears. She wanted to look, but her neck felt like it had turned to stone. Then a shadow fell over her. Large, broad, and motionless. The man said nothing, just knelt beside her. His hands were rough, calloused from years of labor, but strangely gentle as he slipped his coat around her frail body. She felt herself being lifted, cradled against a chest that smelled faintly of leather, hay, and rain-soaked earth. He didn't ask her name. Didn't ask who left her there or why. He just carried her toward a faded pickup truck parked along the fence line. She heard the creak of the door, the slam, and then the hum of the engine. The heat from the vents brushed her face, and she let herself drift away, somewhere between fear and fragile safety. The man was a rancher. His name, she would later learn, was Caleb Hart. People in the nearest small town knew him as a man of few words. His land stretched miles in every direction, dotted with cattle, weathered barns, and an old ranch house that seemed as stoic and unyielding as its owner. Caleb lived alone. His wife had passed 5 years ago, taken suddenly by an illness that moved faster than hope could catch it. Since then, his life had been a quiet routine: sunrise chores, feeding livestock, fixing fences, long days under the open sky, and evenings in silence. When Caleb carried the girl into his home that night, she was little more than skin and bone. He laid her on the old leather couch by the fireplace, wrapped her in blankets, and made a pot of soup. She barely managed 2 spoonfuls before her head lolled to the side in sleep. He didn't press her for answers. Instead, he let the days pass slowly, tending to her as one would tend to a wounded animal, patiently, respectfully, without expectation. It was nearly a week before she spoke her first word. Her voice was hoarse, as though unused for months. "Why?" she asked. Caleb paused in the act of setting a plate of eggs before her. "Why what? Why did you help me?" Her eyes flicked to the sign that still sat on the table where he had placed it after cutting it from her neck. Her voice cracked. "You could have believed it." Caleb sat down opposite her, his weathered hands wrapping around a mug of coffee. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, steady and unreadable. "I don't take my truth from cardboard," he said simply. She stared at him, something tightening in her chest. She didn't know how to answer that. Her name was Mara, 17 years old. She had been living with distant relatives since her mother's death the year before. To them, she was just another burden, another plate to fill, another mouth to feed. Her quiet nature, her struggle in school after years of instability, and her reluctance to speak up made her an easy target for cruelty. Eventually, they stopped speaking to her altogether, except to point out her worthlessness. One night, after she dared ask for more food, they threw her into a truck, drove her miles away, and left her by the roadside with that sign around her neck. Caleb didn't react with shock or pity when she told him. He simply nodded and handed her another slice of bread. Mara found his silence both frustrating and comforting. It was as if he understood that sometimes, the only thing more exhausting than pain was having to explain it over and over. Weeks passed. The winter deepened, blanketing the ranch in frost. Caleb showed Mara how to feed the cattle, how to check the fences, how to chop wood for the fireplace. The work was hard, but there was something strangely satisfying in it, something that made her feel more present than she had in years. She began to eat more, sleep more soundly. Her cheeks gained color again. Still, she spoke little. Caleb never pushed. Instead, he gave her space to find her own words, her own place in this strange, quiet world. But one evening, as they sat at the kitchen table repairing a broken bridle, Mara asked a question that had been gnawing at her. "Do you think people change?" she asked. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "I think people show you more of themselves when they're given the chance. Sometimes what you see isn't new, it's just what's been hidden." She didn't realize it then, but that answer would take root in her heart. Spring came. The snow melted, giving way to green pastures and a sky so blue it seemed to go on forever. Mara began to laugh more, soft, tentative sounds at first, like a bird testing its wings. She found herself talking to the horses as she brushed them, humming to the calves, and watching the sunsets from the porch with a sense of quiet wonder. But the past has a way of knocking on the door when you least expect it. One hot afternoon, a dusty truck pulled up to the ranch. Mara froze when she recognized the man who stepped out, her uncle. His eyes darted around before settling on her. "There you are," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "We've been looking everywhere. You ran off." "I didn't run," Mara said, her voice shaking but steady. "You left me." Her uncle's jaw tightened. "Don't talk like that, you're coming home." Before Mara could respond, Caleb stepped forward. His stance was calm, but there was an unspoken steel in it. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't choose to go." The uncle laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "She's family. You can't keep her." Caleb's gaze didn't waver. "I'm not keeping her. I'm giving her a place where she's wanted." For the first time, Mara felt something shift inside her, a fragile but fierce realization. She wasn't powerless anymore. She turned to her uncle, her hands clenched at her sides. "I'm staying," she said, her voice firm. "And I'm not useless." Her uncle's face twisted, but something in Caleb's silent presence made him back down. With a muttered curse, he turned and left, the sound of his engine fading into the distance. That night, Mara sat by the fire, staring at the flames. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Caleb sipped his coffee. "You don't have to. You're doing the work yourself." Years later, Mara would remember that moment as the first time she believed her life could be her own. She stayed on the ranch, learning the land, the animals, and the quiet rhythms that had once belonged only to Caleb. She grew strong, not just in her body, but in her voice, her choices, her spirit. And one day, when a young runaway showed up at the ranch, exhausted and afraid, Mara knew exactly what to do. She knelt down, wrapped the girl in her own coat, and said the same words Caleb had once given her without speaking: "You are wanted." Because sometimes, the smallest